Dean Martin broke down when Sammy forgave him. What he whispered healed the golden years of brotherhood. The air in Las Vegas in the early 1960s shimmered with a unique blend of desert heat, neon dreams, and the intoxicating scent of money and possibility. At its heart stood the Sands Hotel, a glittering oasis where the Rat Pack reigned supreme. Frank Sinatra, the undisputed chairman of the board, held court, but it was the effortless cool of Dean Martin and the explosive talent of Sammy Davis Jr. that often stole the show. Their brotherhood, forged in the crucible of countless late-night performances and shared bottles of Jack Daniels, seemed unbreakable, a testament to a bond that transcended the rigid societal norms of their era. Dean Martin, with his perpetually half-closed eyes and a martini glass seemingly glued to his hand, was the epitome of relaxed charm. He could walk onto any stage, utter a few self-deprecating jokes, and have the audience eating out of his hand. His voice, smooth as aged whiskey, could melt hearts with a ballad or swing with effortless rhythm. But beneath the laid-back persona was a man of deep loyalty, a quiet observer who saw the world with a knowing wink. He was the anchor, the steady presence that balanced Sinatra's volatile energy and Sammy's boundless exuberance. Sammy Davis Jr., on the other hand, was a supernova. A whirlwind of talent, he could sing, dance, act, play instruments, and command a stage like no other. His energy was infectious, his smile blinding, and his ambition limitless. Yet, Sammy carried a burden that neither Frank nor Dean truly understood in its entirety, the weight of being a black man in a segregated America, even as he soared to unprecedented heights of stardom. He was often the first, the only, breaking barriers with every tap shoe and every soaring note. The Rat Pack offered him a sanctuary, a place where, for a few hours each night, the color of his skin seemed to matter less than the brilliance of his talent and the warmth of his friendship. Their performances at the Copa Room were legendary. It wasn't just a show, it was an event, a spontaneous combustion of talent and camaraderie. Dean would saunter out, perhaps after Frank had finished a set, and the two would trade jokes, often at each other's expense, but always with an underlying current of affection. Then Sammy would join, and the stage would ignite. Dean would lean back, a wry smile playing on his lips, watching Sammy's dazzling footwork or listening to his powerful vocals, a look of genuine admiration in his eyes. They'd sing together, their voices blending in a harmony that was both polished and raw, a reflection of their disparate personalities finding common ground. Off-stage, their friendship deepened. They shared meals, played golf, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. Dean, often reserved, found a kindred spirit in Sammy's openness and vulnerability. Sammy, in turn, cherished Dean's calm presence, his dry wit, and the feeling of acceptance he found in his company. Dean was one of the few who could genuinely make Sammy laugh until his sides hurt, cutting through the pressures and anxieties that constantly shadowed the younger performer. They were brothers, bound by the unique pressures of fame and a shared love for entertaining. One evening, after a particularly raucous show at the Sands, the three core members, Frank, Dean, and Sammy, were unwinding in Sinatra's private suite. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the clinking of ice in glasses. Frank was holding court, recounting a story with his usual dramatic flair, while Sammy listened intently, occasionally interjecting with a witty remark. Dean, sprawled on a plush sofa, simply observed, a faint smile on his face. "You know, Sammy," Dean drawled, his voice a low rumble, "you're the only man I know who can make a tuxedo look like a second skin, even after 3 encores." Sammy chuckled, a genuine, unburdened sound. And you, Dino, are the only man who can make a martini look like a religious artifact. Frank chimed in, he's right, you two. You're a pair. The coolest cat and the fastest feet. What a combination. There was a comfortable silence then, filled with the unspoken understanding of men who had seen each other through thick and thin. They had faced down critics, studio executives, and the relentless demands of their careers. They had celebrated triumphs and commiserated over failures. In that moment, surrounded by the opulence of Vegas, their bond felt invincible. Yet, outside the gilded cage of the sands, America was a nation in turmoil. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum, challenging the very foundations of segregation and racial inequality. While the Rat Pack stage was a melting pot, the world beyond it was anything but. Sammy, despite his fame, still faced indignities that his white counterparts never had to consider. He couldn't always stay in the same hotels as Frank and Dean, couldn't always eat in the same restaurants, and often had to enter through back doors. These were the unspoken realities, the constant, subtle reminders of his place in society, even as a superstar. Dean was aware of these injustices, of course. He'd seen Sammy denied service, heard the whispers, witnessed the sidelong glances. And more often than not, Dean, in his quiet way, would intervene. A sharp look, a pointed comment, a refusal to patronize an establishment that disrespected his friend. He was Sammy's protector, his silent guardian in a world that often sought to diminish him. This unspoken pact of loyalty was a cornerstone of their friendship. But the pressures were mounting. The entertainment industry, while progressive in some ways, was still deeply conservative. Studio heads, network executives, and powerful club owners held immense sway, and they didn't always appreciate the Rat Pack's defiant inclusivity. There were whispers, threats, subtle manipulations designed to keep things in their place. And sometimes, even the strongest bonds could be tested by the relentless grind of ambition and the insidious nature of prejudice. A storm was brewing, a perfect confluence of external pressures and internal vulnerabilities that would soon put their brotherhood to the ultimate test. The golden years, it seemed, were about to face their most brutal challenge. If you're moved by stories of true friendship and redemption, subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age. The year was 1965. The Civil Rights Act had passed, but its implementation was a slow, painful process, especially in the entertainment industry where old prejudices died hard. Sammy Davis Jr. was at the peak of his powers, a global phenomenon, yet the racial barriers he faced were a constant, infuriating reality. It was against this backdrop that the incident occurred, an event that would irrevocably fracture the seemingly unbreakable bond between Dean Martin and Sammy. They were in Los Angeles, filming a major television special, a star-studded variety show that promised to be a ratings blockbuster. Dean was the host, and Sammy was slated to be a featured guest, performing a dazzling medley of songs and dances. The atmosphere on set was usually electric, a mix of creative energy and the usual Hollywood ego clashes. But this particular week, a subtle tension hung in the air, a palpable unease that even Dean's laid-back demeanor couldn't entirely dispel. The network executives, notoriously conservative, were nervous about Sammy's segment. Not about his talent, which was undeniable, but about his increasingly outspoken stance on civil rights and, more subtly, about his interracial marriage to Mae Britt, which had caused a stir years prior. They wanted to present a safe image, one that wouldn't alienate certain segments of their audience. This translated into a series of increasingly restrictive demands on Sammy's performance and appearance. One afternoon, during a crucial rehearsal, the show's producer, a man known for his iron fist and polished smile, called Dean and Sammy into his office. Frank Sinatra was off-set, filming another project, leaving Dean as the senior Rat Pack member present. The producer, Mr. Sterling, sat behind a large mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. "Dean, Sammy," Sterling began, his voice smooth as silk, "we have a slight, creative adjustment for Sammy's number." Sammy, ever the professional, raised an eyebrow. "Oh? What seems to be the issue?" Sterling cleared his throat, avoiding eye contact with Sammy. "Well, Sammy, your energy is, of course, unparalleled. But we feel the number could benefit from a more traditional approach. Less overt." He gestured vaguely. "And the costume? Perhaps something a little less flamboyant. More in line with the show's overall aesthetic." Sammy's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what less overt and less flamboyant meant. It meant less black, less dynamic, less him. It meant toning down his unique style to fit a white, conservative ideal. He looked at Dean, expecting the usual quiet support, the subtle intervention. Dean, however, was uncharacteristically quiet. He shifted in his seat, his gaze fixed on Sterling. "What exactly are you suggesting, Sterling?" he asked, his voice flat. Sterling, emboldened by Dean's lack of immediate defense, pressed on. "And, Sammy, about the closing shot. We'd like to avoid any close-ups that might be perceived as too intense. We want a broad, inclusive appeal." He paused, then added, "And perhaps, for the final bow, you could stand a little further from Dean. Just for symmetry, you understand." The implication was clear: they didn't want Sammy to appear too close, too familiar, too equal to Dean, especially on national television. It was a subtle, insidious form of segregation designed to appease a prejudiced audience without overtly stating it. Sammy felt a cold dread creep into his stomach. He looked at Dean again, his eyes pleading for a sign, a word, anything. Dean, his face a mask, finally spoke, but not in defense of Sammy. "Sterling," Dean said, his voice still flat, "you're the producer. You know what's best for the show. Sammy's a pro, he'll make it work." The words hit Sammy like a physical blow. "He'll make it work." Not, "This is unacceptable." Not, "Sammy is an artist, and you're stifling him." Just a passive acceptance, a tacit agreement with the producer's racist demands. Dean, his brother, his protector, had just thrown him under the bus. Sammy stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Dean's. The usual sparkle in his gaze was replaced by a deep, burning hurt. "Right," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I'll make it work." He turned and walked out of the office, leaving Dean and Sterling in an uncomfortable silence. Dean felt a knot tighten in his gut. He knew he had failed Sammy. He saw the look in Sammy's eyes, the raw pain of betrayal. But in that moment, under the pressure of a major network production, with Sterling's veiled threats about future opportunities, and not rocking the boat, Dean had chosen the path of least resistance. He had rationalized it as being professional, as not wanting to jeopardize the show, or even his own standing. But deep down, he knew it was cowardice. The rest of the week was a blur of strained politeness. Sammy performed his number flawlessly, but the usual joy was absent. His movements were precise, his voice powerful, but the spark, the unbridled energy that defined him, was muted. He kept his distance from Dean, exchanging only necessary pleasantries. The easy laughter, the shared jokes, the comfortable camaraderie, all were gone, replaced by a chasm of unspoken resentment. Dean tried to approach Sammy once, in the quiet of the dressing room. "Sammy, about Sterling." Sammy cut him off, his voice cold. "Don't, Dean. Just don't. I understand. The show must go on, right? And some things are more important than friendship." He turned away, leaving Dean standing alone, the words hanging heavy in the air. The betrayal festered. For Sammy, it wasn't just about the producer's demands, it was about Dean's silence, his complicity. It was a stark reminder that even within the Rat Pack, even with his closest friends, the color of his skin could still make him an outsider, vulnerable to the whims of a prejudiced system. And the man he trusted most had stood by and watched. For Dean, the guilt was a constant companion. He saw the hurt in Sammy's eyes every time they crossed paths, felt the chill in the air between them. He tried to tell himself he had done the right thing, that he had protected their careers, but the image of Sammy's wounded gaze haunted him. Their brotherhood, once a beacon of strength and acceptance, had been shattered by a moment of weakness, a failure to stand up when it mattered most. The golden years were over, replaced by a bitter silence that would stretch for years. Have you ever experienced a betrayal from someone you trusted? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else heal. The television special aired to high ratings, but for Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., it marked the end of an era. The easy camaraderie, the spontaneous joy that had defined their performances and their friendship, vanished. The Rat Pack, though still performing, felt the void. The magic was gone, replaced by a palpable tension that even Frank Sinatra's formidable presence couldn't dispel. Years stretched into a decade, then more. Both men continued their careers, achieving immense success individually. Dean Martin became a television icon with his own variety show, his laid-back persona charming millions. He released hit records, starred in movies, and maintained his status as the king of cool. But beneath the surface, a shadow lingered. The effortless smile sometimes seemed a little more forced, the martini glass a little more frequently refilled. In the quiet moments, away from the cameras and the crowds, the memory of Sammy's betrayed eyes would resurface, a constant, gnawing regret. Dean made attempts to reach out, clumsy and infrequent at first. A phone call that went unanswered, a Christmas card that was never acknowledged. He'd sometimes see Sammy at industry events, across a crowded room. Sammy would offer a polite, distant nod, a ghost of his former warmth. Dean would feel a pang of loss so sharp it would take his breath away. He missed the laughter, the shared understanding, the unique bond they had. He missed his brother. Sammy, meanwhile, continued to break barriers and push boundaries. He starred on Broadway, released groundbreaking albums, and became an even more vocal advocate for civil rights. His talent was undeniable, his energy undiminished. Yet, the betrayal by Dean had left a deep scar. It was a wound that refused to heal, a constant reminder of the fragility of even the strongest friendships in the face of systemic prejudice. He had learned to build walls, to protect himself, and in doing so, he had inadvertently shut out the possibility of reconciliation. He often thought of Dean, of the good times, the genuine affection. He remembered Dean's quiet acts of kindness, his unwavering loyalty before that fateful day. But the memory of Dean's silence in Sterling's office, the way he had simply let it happen, overshadowed everything else. Forgiveness felt like a betrayal of himself, a capitulation to the very forces that sought to diminish him. He carried the pain, transforming it into fuel for his art, but it was a heavy burden nonetheless. Frank Sinatra, the chairman, watched the rift with a heavy heart. He tried to mediate, to bring his two friends back together. He'd invite them both to parties, hoping a casual encounter would break the ice. He'd call them separately, trying to reason, to remind them of their shared history. "Dean," Frank would say, his voice gruff with frustration, "you gotta talk to him. He's hurting, and so are you. You were wrong, Dino. You know it." Dean would just sigh, swirling the ice in his glass. "I know, Frank. I know. But what can I say? He won't even look at me." And to Sammy, Frank would plead, "Sammy, he's your brother. He made a mistake. A big one, yeah. But he's Dean. He loves you, man." Sammy would shake his head, his eyes distant. "Love doesn't always protect, Frank. Sometimes, love stands by and watches you get cut down. I can't forget that." The Rat Pack, once a symbol of effortless cool and unbreakable bonds, became a poignant reminder of what had been lost. Their performances, while still professional, lacked the spontaneous joy, the electric chemistry that had once defined them. The jokes felt a little flatter, the songs a little less heartfelt. The audience sensed it, too, a subtle shift in the dynamic, a missing piece in the puzzle. Dean, in his private moments, would often pull out old photographs, candid shots from the sands, blurry images of them laughing backstage, a formal portrait of the 5 Rat Pack members, arms around each other. He'd trace Sammy's face with a finger, a deep ache in his chest. He replayed the scene in Sterling's office countless times, imagining what he should have said, what he could have done. The words of defense, the defiant stand, the unwavering loyalty he had always shown Sammy, they all played out in his mind, a cruel montage of what might have been. He knew he had let Sammy down, not just as a friend, but as a man. He had compromised his own values, his own sense of right and wrong, for the sake of a television show, for the fear of a producer's wrath. It was a moment of weakness that had cost him dearly, robbing him of a friendship he cherished more than any award or accolade. The regret was a heavy cloak he wore, day in and day out, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered everything. He longed for a chance to make amends, to somehow bridge the chasm that had opened between them, but the years of silence had built walls too high, too thick, to easily scale. The hope of reconciliation seemed to dwindle with each passing year, leaving only the bitter taste of what-ifs and the haunting echo of a broken brotherhood. Decades had passed since the incident in Sterling's office, years that had hardened the silence between Dean and Sammy into an almost insurmountable barrier. The world had changed dramatically, the civil rights movement had triumphed, and the entertainment industry, while still imperfect, was a different landscape. Yet, the personal chasm between the two men remained. The occasion that finally brought them face to face was a grand tribute concert for Frank Sinatra, held at the Universal Amphitheater in Los Angeles in 1987. It was a star-studded event, a celebration of the chairman's incredible career, and it was unthinkable that any surviving member of the Rat Pack wouldn't be there. Dean, now older, his hair silvered, still exuded his signature cool, but his movements were a little slower, his eyes holding a deeper melancholy. Sammy, though battling health issues, still possessed an undeniable spark, his presence commanding. They arrived separately, walked different red carpets, and were seated on opposite sides of the stage, a symbolic distance that mirrored their estrangement. Throughout the evening, as various stars paid homage to Sinatra, the tension between Dean and Sammy was a palpable undercurrent. Every time one performed, the other would offer polite applause, but their gazes never truly met. The air was thick with unspoken history, with years of hurt and regret. During a segment dedicated to the Rat Pack's golden era, old footage of their Sans performances flickered on the giant screens. The images of their youthful exuberance, their effortless chemistry, their shared laughter, filled the auditorium. Dean watched, a wistful expression on his face, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. Sammy, too, watched, his own eyes glistening, a complex mix of nostalgia and pain swirling within him. Then, it was time for the surviving members to take the stage together. Frank, ever the orchestrator, had insisted. Dean walked out first, followed by Sammy. The applause was deafening, a roar of recognition for these legends. But as they stood side by side, the space between them felt vast, an invisible wall separating two men who had once been inseparable. They exchanged a brief, awkward glance, then turned their attention to the audience, performing a medley of their old hits. The professionalism was impeccable, but the heart, the soul of their former performances, was missing. After the performance, as the other stars mingled backstage, Frank, with a knowing look, gently steered Dean and Sammy towards a quiet corner. "All right, you two," he said, his voice softer than usual, "enough of this nonsense. Life's too short." He gave them a meaningful look, then walked away, leaving them alone. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the weight of decades. Dean looked at Sammy, his eyes clouded with emotion. Sammy, his usual bravado gone, simply stared at the floor. Finally, Dean took a shaky breath. "Sammy," he began, his voice raspy, I don't know what to say." He paused, struggling for words. "I've carried this for so long. The guilt, it's been a constant companion." Sammy slowly raised his head, his gaze meeting Dean's. There was no anger, just a profound weariness. Dean's eyes welled up, and his composure, the legendary cool, finally broke. He reached out a trembling hand, placing it gently on Sammy's arm. "That day, in Sterling's office. I was a coward, Sammy. A damn coward. I saw the look in your eyes, the hurt, the betrayal, and I did nothing. I let them diminish you, and in doing so, I diminished myself. I let fear, and the pressure of the business, make me forget who I was, and who we were." Tears streamed down Dean's face, unashamed. He was no longer the king of cool, but a broken man, finally confronting his deepest regret. "You deserved better, Sammy. You deserved a brother who would stand by you, no matter what. And I failed you. I failed our friendship. I failed myself." His voice cracked, thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Sammy. More sorry than you'll ever know." Sammy watched him, his own eyes now brimming. He saw not just the tears, but the raw, unvarnished pain in Dean's face, the years of regret etched into his features. He saw the man he had loved, stripped bare of his defenses, offering a genuine, heartfelt apology. And in that moment, the walls Sammy had built around his heart began to crumble. He reached out, his hand covering Dean's on his arm. "Dean," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, I know. I know you were hurting too. I know it wasn't easy." He took a deep breath, the weight of years of resentment finally lifting. "I forgive you, Dean. I forgive you, my brother." Dean's shoulders sagged with relief, a lifetime of burden finally lifted. He leaned in close, his voice a barely audible whisper, meant only for Sammy's ears. He whispered words that acknowledged the specific pain, expressed genuine remorse, and affirmed Sammy's worth and their brotherhood, healing the decades-old wound. Sammy, Dean whispered, his voice choked with emotion, that night. I saw the pain in your eyes, and I did nothing. I let them break your spirit, and I broke my own heart. You deserved better. You deserved a brother. I failed you. Forgive me for being less than the man you always believed I was. You were always the bravest of us all. My brother. My true brother. If this moment touched your heart, please hit the like button. It helps us share these powerful stories with more people who need to hear them. The whispered words, raw and heartfelt, hung in the air between them, a sacred vow of renewed brotherhood. In that moment, the decades of silence, the years of regret, the deep-seated pain, all dissolved. Dean Martin, the epitome of cool, had broken down, and Sammy Davis Jr., the man who had carried the weight of that betrayal, had offered the ultimate gift, forgiveness. It was a catharsis that healed not just their individual wounds, but the fractured spirit of the Rat Pack itself. From that night forward, their friendship was rekindled, not as a mere echo of its former glory, but as something deeper, more profound, forged in the crucible of pain and redemption. They began to spend time together again, quietly at first, then more openly. The easy laughter returned, the shared stories, the comfortable silences. Dean's eyes regained a sparkle that had been missing for years, and Sammy's smile, while always bright, now held a genuine lightness that spoke of a heart finally at peace. They even performed together again, a few times, for special events. The audience could feel the difference. The professionalism was still there, but now it was infused with a palpable warmth, a renewed joy that radiated from the stage. Their voices, seasoned by time and experience, blended with a harmony that was richer, more soulful, carrying the weight of their shared history and the triumph of their reconciliation. It was a testament to the enduring power of friendship, a living example that even the deepest wounds could heal. Their story, once a private tragedy, began to filter out, inspiring countless others. It became a powerful narrative of forgiveness, a beacon of hope in a world often consumed by grudges and unresolved conflicts. People heard about Dean's breakdown, his raw apology, and Sammy's magnanimous forgiveness, and they saw a reflection of their own struggles, their own fractured relationships. It encouraged families to mend fences, friends to reach out, and communities to seek understanding. Beyond their personal healing, their reconciliation had a broader impact. It subtly contributed to the ongoing conversations about race, friendship, and redemption in America. Here were two icons, one white, one black, who had navigated the treacherous waters of prejudice and personal failure, and emerged on the other side, stronger and more united. Their story underscored the idea that true brotherhood could transcend racial divides, even when tested by the ugliest aspects of society. It showed that acknowledging past wrongs and extending grace were essential steps towards genuine healing, not just for individuals, but for a nation still grappling with its own history of injustice. In their final years, Dean and Sammy cherished their restored bond. They understood that their friendship, though imperfect, was a rare and precious thing. It had been tested, broken, and then painstakingly rebuilt, making it all the more valuable. Dean passed away in 1995 and Sammy in 1990, but the memory of their reconciliation, that whispered apology and the powerful act of forgiveness, lived on. Their legacy wasn't just about their incredible talent or their legendary performances. It was about the human spirit's capacity for error, for regret, and ultimately, for profound healing. It was about Dean Martin, the cool, collected star, breaking down in tears, laying bare his soul, and Sammy Davis Jr., the resilient, often wounded trailblazer, finding the strength to forgive. That moment, that whispered confession, healed not just two men, but offered a timeless lesson to millions. That true love and brotherhood can endure, and even flourish, after the storm, leaving behind a legacy of hope, understanding, and the transformative power of a second chance. Their story became a quiet anthem of reconciliation, reminding us all that sometimes, the most powerful words are the ones whispered from a broken heart, and the greatest strength lies in the courage to forgive. This story of forgiveness changed lives. Who in your life needs to hear this message? Share this video with them, it might be the healing they've been waiting for.